What if we could secure peace without risking the life of a single law enforcement officer? That is the question posed by Pat Novick in his newscast, The Novick Element. In his show, he gives an overview of a routine operation of robotic peacekeepers in Tehran, featuring OmniCorp peacemakers and their trainer, Rick Maddox. As we witness this, the guest of the show tells Pat that the random patrols, such as the one the world is about to witness, help the local population feel more safe. Or so we thought. As the live feed from the ground begins, we see people coming out of their homes, arms raised, so they can be scanned one by the robots. Meanwhile, still hiding inside the houses are getting ready for an attack against the robots. Just as the reporter on the ground tells the viewing audience about how the citizens are being protected, in the background, a fighter bombs a car behind her, and the robots enter attack mode. As tensions arise and the begin throwing themselves towards the large robots, a young boy gets a kitchen knife and goes outside in hopes of fighting as well. All of this caught on camera. But back in the studio, Novick cuts the feed, as per instructions from the Pentagon, for security purposes, he says. From this, he drives home his main idea: there is nothing more important in the world than the safety of American people. Meanwhile, in Detroit, we see police detective Alex Murphy, fresh after a job where his partner was severely injured. He is reprimanded by his commanding officer, Detroit Chief of Police Karen Dean, even after he and his partner found out that the guns that crime boss Antoine Vallon were using were coming in from police inventory. It was this very investigation into the matter that led to him being caught up in Vallon's web. Together with his partner, Lewis, they try to stage a buy-bust operation, but in the middle of the mission, someone tips off Vallon, and everything just goes sideways. Gunmen start shooting at them, and while Alex was able to subdue many, his partner is later shot in the chest. On a more national scale, we see OmniCorp CEO Raymond Sellers lobbying for the use of his robotic peacekeepers that we saw earlier in domestic law enforcement. But the Dreyfus Act, as discussed by the lawmaker himself, forbids the use of these robots, on the basis that they cannot feel anything, not even remorse, not even if they end up shooting. And with that, more than 70% of the American public agrees with him and the act. This is not good news for OmniCorp. Back at their HQ, desperate to sell their product, we see the team trying to think of a way to get a foothold on the American market, the largest one in the world in terms of crime. While the marketing head advocates for a more aggressive campaign to sway public opinion, Sellers thinks of a loophole to the ban, putting a man inside of the robot they create. For this to work, they need the help of Dr. Dennett Norton, who specializes in helping amputees with the use of artificial limbs and technology. In his office, we see him hard at work, helping a patient learn how to play guitar again. This emotional moment, however, is interrupted by Sellers, who invites him over to his office to discuss the matter. Here, he reminds Sellers of their agreement that his work will never be used for combat. But the promise of funding in his research and the idea of saving thousands of lives becomes enough to persuade him. He agrees, and the team starts looking for suitable candidates among ex-officers, all who have been amputated or disabled. Their top candidate is an athletic amputee, confined to a wheelchair. He would have been the most appealing candidate, but Norton rejects him, saying that his mental state doesn't fit the requirements of the project. The candidate needs to be mentally stable. Back in Detroit, once again, we follow Alex, talking to his bedridden partner at the hospital. As he speaks with him, outside, we see one of Vallon's men place something under his car. He later goes home, greets his wife, Clara, and their son David. Just as husband and wife are about to seal the deal for the night, his car alarm begins blaring. Not wanting to wake their son up and spoil the mood even further, he goes out to turn the alarm off. After several attempts of it not working, he goes near it, opens the door, and the car just explodes. He suffers third-degree burns on 80% of his body, and with the severity of his injuries, he will remain paralyzed and in pain for the rest of his life. Or at least, that's what Dr. Norton tells Alex's wife, as they try to convince her to let them develop the technology on his body. They tell her that it's his only chance, and she believes them. 3 months later, we see Alex at a get-together, fully healed and dancing with his wife. His friends are there, and so is Lewis. He was happy and whole again. But all of it is just a dream. When he wakes up, we see that his body has been replaced with the peacekeepers. Norton and his assistant try to convince him that he would be all right. But after being released, he tries running away briefly before being shut down abruptly in the middle of a rice field. He is later brought back to the lab, where Norton tells him everything. He tells him he's been in an accident, and that he almost passed away. After revealing this, Norton then shows him his body, or at least, what's left of it. All he had left was his head, his lungs, and even his brain had been reconstructed. Norton assures him that he is still in control. Disgusted by what he saw, and what Norton has done to him, Alex tries to ask to be euthanized. Norton then tells him how his wife signed the consent forms, because she loved him. He asks him what he would tell his son. He tells him how heartbroken they would be if all this pain and work would just go to waste. After a very brief call with his wife, Alex undergoes intense training with trainer Rick Maddox, who disapproves of the idea of putting a man inside a peacekeeper. He later proves that, by the fact that compared to his trained robots, Alex has a 5-second delay caused by the time he spends making decisions, rendering him a failure by Omnicorp's standard. To remedy that, Norton rewires Alex's brain and makes his programming a bit more efficient by letting the drone take over his actions while making him think that they are still his. It works, dramatically, and he is able to wow the CEO himself and give Maddox a satisfying stun during his demonstration. This came with drawbacks, however. He becomes less empathetic with humans. With the success of this demo, he is then allowed to see his family again. While Clara is comforted by his presence, David is apprehensive at first, before warming up eventually. But not for long, as he still has to do certain maintenance on his suit, and leaves almost as soon as he got home. Now with everything ironed out, he is almost ready to be unveiled to the public. Just minutes before his press conference, Norton feeds his mind with the entire police department's database, including his own murder. The reenactment of his murder causes him to go into a seizure, and to fix it, Norton lowers his dopamine levels to 2%, making him into a full-blown RoboCop, with no emotions. When he goes out to the public, he completely ignores his family, ignores every nicety he encounters, and right there on stage, he makes the arrest on a wanted criminal, who is just standing a few feet in front of 2 human police officers. With all of this being caught on tape, RoboCop becomes a sensation, especially with the encouragement of the mechanized crime control supporter show, Novik Element. His fanbase grows as he tends to the decline of Detroit's criminal population, which has made rounds in repealing the Dreyfus Act. But despite all of this, Sellers instructs that Clara and David are kept away from Alex throughout the entire time. Norton tries to warn him and his legal team about what this could cause, but unfortunately, Clara confronts Alex and tells him that their son had been having nightmares and has been reluctant to go to school. As Alex moves on to supposedly solve cases, he starts accessing files related to Clara and David, only to find that they have been constantly bombarded by the press, furthering David's anxiety. He later goes on to their family home, where he reconstructs the scene of his own murder. It is only then he realizes that the entire time, his son saw the explosion happen, and has been suffering from PTSD ever since. This rediscovery of his origin as RoboCop causes his brain to rewire itself back to its original dopamine level, and despite it being against protocol, Norton and the marketing head just let it happen, as he sets out to solve his own murder. After tracking down his gang, he quickly finds Antoine Vallon, the man who ordered him to be eliminated. Though Vallon knows his weakness, and Alex sustains heavy damage from the high-caliber guns, he still manages to shoot everyone up, including Vallon himself. But the rabbit hole doesn't stop there, and he knows it. After scanning a gun for prints, he finds the prints of his 2 co-workers. He heads down to the Detroit Police Department to confront them, and while one of them tries to get violent, the other confesses to the involvement of none other than the chief of police herself, the very same woman that apprehended him for going rogue with his partner and uncovering the guns that Vallon had. He tries getting a confession out of her, but before she can say anything more, he is remotely shut down by Maddox. This entire situation, while extremely beyond protocol, is later used by Sellers to sell the idea of mechanized crime control to the public, with the help of Pat Novik. While he certainly has the public divided on opinion regarding the matter, he still has some loose ends to take care of. And one of those loose ends decides to speak to the press and reveal to everyone that they have not been allowed to see Alex at all. In his desperation, Sellers brainstorms with his team on how to navigate the situation. They've made a hero out of Alex Murphy, but they need something more. They need a martyr to fully sell the idea to the public. While they try to convince Clara that they did all that they could to save Alex and revive him, Dr. Norton hatches a plan to remove his transmitter and break Alex out of the facility with the help of his research assistant. The 2 are successful, but then Alex refuses to heed Norton's warnings. He narrowly escapes the building but quickly goes back. He fights larger Peacemaker drones and sustains significant damage on them, but just before he's done for, his old partner shows up and obstructs the drone's view, rendering it unable to shoot, and giving Alex time to escape. With his arm gone and his visor completely damaged, Alex is not in good shape to fight, but unfortunately for him, as he tries to get to the roof where Sellers is, he runs into Maddox, who is wearing a red tag. The red tag makes it impossible for Alex to shoot, unless his programming forcibly shuts him down. Maddox tries subduing Alex, and almost succeeds in destroying him, but not before Lewis shoots him first. With Maddox gone, Alex goes up to the roof. There, he sees Clara and David, after the 2 were asked by Sellers to go there, so they could be as far away from Alex as possible. But too bad for old Sellers, because they beefed up their RoboCop too well, save for the fact that Alex can't shoot anyone with a red tag, which, unfortunately, includes Sellers. Sellers taunts him with this, tells him he was nothing more than a machine that does things, and with that, Alex successfully overrides his programming long enough to shoot the guy before shutting down. Very soon after, the project behind the mechanized crime control of Omnicorp is shut down, and the president immediately vetoes the bill that repeals the Dreyfus Law, with the help, of course, of Dr. Norton's scathing testimony of how unethical the experiment Meanwhile, Alex's recovered body is later prepared and rebuilt as he waits for Clara and David to come and see him. While this remains a sort of happy ending for Alex, Pat Novick, however, is fuming with the way things turned out. But as he says, America is the greatest country in the world. Am I right, fellas?